over the last 20 years of HR and recruitment and ask yourself, have we as industries improved and progressed? A lot of you will say yes, for the obvious reasons of the improvement of technologies, the improvement of processes. But in reality, has hiring actually changed? That's what we've posed today. And the guest, Alex, who's a fractional PA and HR leader, wants to kind of take a more radical approach in how we can actually progress as an industry. So here's what we've got coming up for you over the next half hour.
I think we're missing the point of hiring, which is a two-way street. It's still a lot of one-sided power games. That's how I see it. As a company, I'm still in the power game. I recruit. I make a decision to give you money. I make a decision if you're good enough or not. What I love most is when they say, oh, by the way, this time around not, but please keep checking our website for new jobs. I'm like, why don't you keep checking if I would fit one of your jobs? And that alone, just a very simple thing, shows that there is a power imbalance. If we think that we need to understand the culture of a team, we need to understand the needs of a manager or a leader, but also the need of a candidate and how those match. How is the dynamic in a team? How's the dynamic in an organization? I think it goes well beyond the sales aspect. And I often see people that lack exactly those qualities.
This is very much one of those conversations where I want you to think not just about how you can improve today, but really have a think about where our industry is heading. How can we improve it collectively? I love this conversation because it's probably one for the first time where we've hypothesized something that hasn't actually happened. Neither Alex or I have actually implemented what we discuss in detail, but I would very much like to find someone who has. So if you listen to this and think we've done this successfully or unsuccessfully, then please do reach out. But for the rest of the episode, please enjoy, and thank you as always. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a true HR leader who has over 20 years of experience spanning a range of industries and organizations, including the likes of Credit Suisse, SoundCloud, Blinkist, and most recently, the team at Native Instruments. Throughout his career, he's honed a broad set of skills in areas from organizational psychology, people management, change management, coaching, new ways of working, you name it. He's probably got some experience somewhere along the lines. From our conversation, it's clear he's got a wealth of insights to uncover from his journey. In this episode, we're going to delve into the current state of HR and talent management, while also looking ahead to the future. We'll explore bold, forward-thinking approaches, one that might initially seem rather radical, but could actually be the breakthrough our industry needs to continue its process of involvement. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, fractional HR leader and coach, Aleks Sibilia. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
That was a very nice introduction to write because you have such a broad and interesting career, and there's so many nuances that kind of make up who you are, and you've seen so much and done so much. And like I said, genuinely, I'm so excited to kind of peel back this idea that you have and kind of where we are from your perspective. But before we get into it, I am curious because where you've seen so many different things, from your perspective, what do you think makes a high-performing talent acquisition team?
That's a very interesting question. And I'm sure that, different people would answer in different ways, but I'll just answer it in my ways. I think what makes a high-performing TA team is to understand who your client is, and the client I'm talking internally. Who are you recruiting for? What's their business? What are their needs? What are their likes? But also go beyond. We always talk about culture within the company, but different teams have different culture. I think understanding that and knowing who am I placing where is super important. But then also the other side, understanding what are the needs of the candidates. And often I think teams look just at the needs of the company and of the hiring manager. I think the high performing teams are the ones that see both sides. And this sounds fairly easy, right? But makes that match. And I think that's actually the high performing part. And the Champions League of recruiting people that actually understand both sides and understand the nuances of it and can match those.
There's also, in that essence as well, not being afraid to stop a process. If you get the feeling actually it's not working out, and by saying, look, it's not the right position for you or for us or for whatever reason, and stopping it sooner than later than just letting it drag out and hope for the best. I think kind of teams go through that process of realizing actually we don't need to have a pipeline of 20 candidates. We could just find two, and out of those two, that's the two we need to bring on.
Yeah.
How do you think? I think on that instance, then, as an industry, because again, over the 20 years that you've got, do you feel that we've kind of been seen more as the quote unquote business partners that talent teams are all kind of talking about and saying that's the route we need to go? But do you actually think we've done enough to be seen as that kind of partner at the moment?
I'm gonna go a bit radical here, and sometimes when I talk
Straight
to
in.
my friends, I say HR is dead, and obviously I'm just exaggerating a little bit. I think if I look back, there was when I started my job and started working in this industry, there was a lot of this hope and this we're gonna be business partners now. I'm gonna partner with the business, and we're not just gonna be a cost center costing money. And I think there was a lot of this energy of going new ways, going away from being just minions, becoming partners. I had for a while, I had the hope that actually we're going in the right direction. I kind of have the feeling we're going backwards again. What I hear often, and obviously this is just my personal experience, what people want, what management teams want, what leaders want, they want minions, right? We know the business, we know what we want, you just go and execute. And just apart from my own opinion, looking at that behavior, it shows that we haven't become partners because that's not what we're seen at. And then there's a question why this is the way it is. I think there's different probably explanations to that. One is, have we really understood the business and have we understood our role in that? But also has the counterpart understood that we can actually do different things. And it's really interesting if you look at the whole COVID epidemic, very interesting to me. HR were the heroes, right? Because we were running after everyone, we were clearing things, policies, making sure everybody was fine because nobody wanted to touch that, right? And it's something that I often see. The hot potatoes, no one wants to touch, so we're going to give them to HR. We solve them with HR, not HR solve them. That's often what I hear. If it's not a hot potato, then we did it, right? So I think from seeing what happens really in everyday life, I don't think we've managed or not managed to that extent that I hoped we should be. And seeing that we're both still mostly, in administration of things, very much into old structures, we do same things we did 20 years ago. I know a lot of people would say, no, it's not true. We use a lot of technology, but interviewing has not changed much. We still do Excel sheets. We don't use the data. We have some clever tools that give us the data, but let's be honest, I've never seen where, a management team said, oh, wow, our retention is low. This is our 10-point program. What they say is to go and fix it. And if you don't fix it, then it's your problem. And then it's about numbers. Then the whole recruiting we said, are we partners? We're often confronted with metrics that we need to reach that don't actually, don't empower us to be partners, but, to have, a fast hiring process. And the faster you hire and the faster you place someone, the better you are a recruiter. And I would just say this is not true. I would actually go the other way. I'd rather have my people invest more time in a good match that I mentioned before than to match someone or some person with the role just to comply with the numbers. But we have managers that want to do fast. We also have candidates, senior candidates who just want to be placed somewhere, that don't take the diligence to actually understand the job, the culture, and see if it's a fit for them. And that we both know is just a super high cost, right? Bad hiring has a very high cost. Also something nobody really talks about it. We all know about it. I like to use those numbers and say, if you hire the wrong person, this is going to cost us probably half a yearly salary of them. And people say, nah, that's, where do you get this from? I said, I didn't invent it. There's a lot of science around it. So we can be partners even in cost savings, but I don't think we've often seen that only then when, um, things go down the drain, then we're asked to minimize salaries or do layoffs. That's the easiest way to save money in a company. Often it's layoffs. That's when HR comes in again. But you see, it's often those kind of negative ways and not the
Mm.
positive, being proactive, looking forward. And I think there's companies and there's people in HR that actually do a really good job in that. But we're talking about the majority. And if we talk about the majority, again, I'm going to be radical in saying HR is dead, but not because it's dead. But I think we just need to rethink how we do things.
Do you think that comes from the cycle of markets though as well? Because as you say that, in could you use a phrase like reactive, and obviously the opposite to that is being a proactive partner. I think proactive is the business partner aspect, is exploring where can we drive impact. So if I take a couple of scenarios of during COVID, it was backs against the wall for everyone. There was no real time to be super proactive because we're going through something we've never done before. We're changing, things are changing literally. I remember my former company at the time, we literally had daily stand-ups across the whole company saying like, this is what's happening, because we were a European-wide company. This is what's happening in this country, and so on and so forth. You kind of have to adapt. Are there periods of time where we can become those business partners, or do you feel kind of it's on an overall element, we've kind of just dropped the ball on that side of things?
I don't think we drop because I see a lot of people that are actually engaged, and I just think we're not maybe progressing. But maybe that's my point, right? That we're just not progressing as far as we can. Everybody at the moment is talking. Just to give you another example, AI in HR. It's here already. It's like I
Yeah,
see companies that have a strategy to think about it in 2 years. Well, in 2 years, AI will think that for you. So
yeah,
but I think COVID is a very good example. What you just mentioned, we learn to do daily stand-up to adapt to the market on a daily moment and saying, what's happening? Where do we need to go? What do we need tomorrow? COVID left, and a lot of teams did not keep that good habit of actually doing that and saying, where are we? Because we're like, everybody was just happy it was over, and everybody
yeah,
just went back to the old things. And that could be just a learning and say, what did we do during a crisis? And that can be COVID or that can be a specific crisis to a company. What did we do there to actually get out of it? And how can we apply this in good times, or I dare say normal times, even though I don't think that exists, but for us in a steady way. And I think also linking to your high performance question, we know from high performing teams that they are actually self-reflective. And when I work with teams, especially when you do engagement surveys, everybody looks at the teams that don't work well and how can we fix it. I love to work with teams that actually have a high engagement score and ask them, what are the factors that lead to you being a high engaged team? Which is really interesting because everybody always knows what's going wrong. But if you ask
yeah.
teams, what are you doing right? People are completely overwhelmed and they have no idea how they reached it. Looking into that, I think, is equally important. That's a small example. We're still looking at the negative. We know that looking at deficits is not helpful. We should look at the success factors. Yet we do the same in hiring as well. We always ask them, what was your biggest failure? Me personally, I don't care about your failures. I want to know that you know what success means and how to re-go there. Yet it's still a question that is often asked. What are your positive traits and your negative traits? I don't see negative traits. Some have not been development. I always say there's no negative traits. There's just development potential. It's the same thing, but just it's the glass half full or half empty. And I think we're still applying those old concepts instead of asking people what led to success. How would you, do success within our culture? How does it link to the team you're going into? And that I think also linking to the person that does the recruitment, how good are they in actually understanding those factors and how they link to each other?
I think if I'm honest, I think that sounds like a bit more like a societal shift though, in how we as individuals are thinking. Because as you're talking now, I'm thinking of a SWOT analysis, right? You give anyone a SWOT analysis, strengths are like one or two things, weaknesses are 25,000 things, right? Always. And then everyone always struggles because no one likes to boast, or very rarely does it happen. And then if you've got that ingrained in people in general, then you've got people, managers of managers, the founders of the companies, etc. They're all thinking probably the same way in that. And in that, there's no kind of real radical shift in that process on the individual level, then feeding it into how the company's culture is created, and that feeds into the hiring process, then the recruitment, et cetera, et cetera. It's always like this snowball effect. So my next question really then is, do we even have the right people in place in HR, in talent acquisition in the first place? You know, are we looking at the right set of skills for what the future role or future department will look like for us?
I will bluntly say no, but just because you know me a little bit, because I also like to provoke the thought process. I think what I see in recruiting often, and obviously again this might not apply to everyone, but and I know recruiting people don't like to hear this, but it's a sales job. Let's be honest, we're selling a job, right? And that's part of the role. And I think people that know and want to sell something well, they actually have those qualities I mentioned before. They understand what is the product, and this is a job or a role in this case. Who is the user? I like to use. I worked in tech and product for many years, so I will use product language. Who's the user, and what's the manual to it, and do we have clarity on it? Because it's like a household appliance. If you don't know how to use it, it's nice to have it. But I think understanding that. But coming back to your question, what I see is often people that are just focused on this aspect. But if we think that we need to understand the culture of a team, we need to understand the needs of a manager or a leader, but also the need of a candidate and how those match. How is the dynamic in a team? How's the dynamic in an organization? I think it goes well beyond the sales aspect. And I often see people that lack exactly those qualities. Also, if you see who does, first assessment or screenings, it's very interesting. I've been in many hiring processes myself, and I don't want to be demeaning to anyone in a junior position. Obviously, we all need to learn. But it's interesting that the first assessment, which I think is super important to understand the nuances, for example, in a CV, are often given to the people with the least experience. And what happens then is that often, and this is my personal experience, but also that I see when working with teams, is what they apply are the classic criteria, right? You have no gaps in your CV. You have too many changes. You just mentioned all the things I've done and been doing and love doing. This is where I often just get on the however unfortunately pile, how I call it.
Yeah.
That's when you get the however unfortunately emails. And interestingly, I read the job description. I'm like, but they want all of these skills and they want all of these experiences across levels, industries, which I might have. But what happens often is too many changes equal difficult person. I don't know how many times I've heard this also in person, by the way. So I think I'm not the easiest person probably to have as an employee. But this is the assumption that people make. Too many changes, somebody is not sustainable. But this is exactly what I meant before. What's the market like? What could have led to it? And experienced people in recruiting, especially in Berlin, for those people that know the Berlin market, we've gone through so many layoffs in the last 2-3 years. Small companies, large companies. I went through 3 layoffs myself. As an HR leader, but also, being part of being made redundant. It's just a reality. But yet, what I hear sometimes as feedback is like, we're afraid that you're not going to be, lasting long enough, even though some of it most probably is also the market share. I'm saying there's always different factors, and me included, but these are nuances that are often unseen. And then you have those people without an experience. They will put interesting profiles on a however unfortunately pile, where I, as a senior, look at them and I'm like, wait a minute, but this looks interesting because they bring something that we need, fast adaptability, or somebody who has gone through crisis because that's what the role needs, or an HR business partner needs. But yet we're still applying the same criteria. And what comes out of the funnel in the end in the shortlist are all these people that comply with these old, nice, classic categories. Nice person, steady progression, movement, but not too much. And then I'm asking myself when I read the job description, what do we actually want? We want all of these high-performing, interesting, super experienced people, but do we really choose them? And those people then become leaders. If I look at HR again, this is those leaders that then choose again. And we know the biases, right, we have in hiring. And I think also I think this is why we're not making progress, because we're not going, for maybe the more unusual. And when I hire, I often like to take the number two in my shortlist. That's a
So we're
practical.
not breaking the mold, are we? As you're saying there, it's
No,
just
no,
repeating. We just keep going through the cycles, and the leaders that are hiring the people that are matching the tick box exercise then become the leaders and do the same thing because that's how they're taught, and so on and so forth.
we're cookie cutters molding the same cookie cutting devices that we've done. Again, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but that's why I feel we're not improving or we're not innovating. And everybody speaks about innovation in HR in general, innovation in TA. Yet let's just take the last 10 years. I haven't seen that innovation. We still use the same talent recruiting systems, the same lists. We talked about using Excel. I love using Excel, but we're not using the data. We're not using the technology. And first and foremost, I think we're missing the point of hiring, which is a two-way street. It's still a lot of one-sided power games. That's how I see it. As a company, I'm still in the power game. I recruit. I make a decision to give you money. I make a decision if you're good enough or not. And talking because we talked about the however unfortunately emails. What I love most is when they say, "Oh, by the way, this time around not, but please keep checking our website for new jobs." I'm like, why don't you keep checking if I would fit one of your jobs? And that alone, just a very simple thing, shows that there is a power imbalance, and people I don't think understand that. I mean, I could go on at length about rejection emails and how to phrase them, and yeah. So the however, unfortunately, is a very passionate topic of
Could have chosen that one for this topic. No, we
mine.
get another discussion. So I'm curious from your perspective because I could ask this to 20, 25 people and I'll probably get similar answers, but yours is always slightly different. What I mean by that is right now, where would you say we are as a market? Are we in a candidate-led market or are we in a client-led market?
I think everybody that you would ask would tell you we're in a candidate-led market, and I'm not going to use the word, but it starts with a B. And I would say no, we're not. We are definitely, not in a candidate-led market, and that's what I was just, pointing at. The
Mm,
power still lies with the clients and not with the candidates, and that for me just shows that there is no candidate market, or at least in my world or how I think I would imagine this to be completely different if it were a
yeah.
candidate-led market.
So what I mean by that now then is because someone will listen and go, well, no, no, you're right, we're in a client-led market, but most people think we've just entered that. The clients finally have the power because there's so much there's only candidates on the market. But correct if I'm wrong, your perception is that we've always sat in kind of like this world of, as you say, a one-sided element. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The power lies on one side, and that for me is then one-sided.
Yeah.
Let me put in.
So the former candidate-led market that I thought we were in as well, I'll put my hand up and say, post-COVID, I'm in the situation thinking, yeah, you're right, the candidates have the power. The reality is actually they do to a certain level, but the client still holds the power because they're still the one who's choosing the process, choosing the people they're going forward with. And the candidate's perceived power is, okay, I've got 3 or 4 companies that want to hire me. And that's why we're all thinking one thing and looking at that going, okay, we're in a candidate-led market and we've just switched. But tell me from your perspective then, if we was to have a true shift to a candidate-led market, what does that actually mean from your perspective?
Yeah. I think what you're just saying, after COVID, I think for clients, when they just have 3 people to choose from instead of 10, they think, oh, it's a candidate-led market because my choice is very limited. But as long as you have 3 good candidates for a role and you know better than me, that's more than enough if they really are a match, right? But in the end of the day, it's still, we're at the mercy of the client. I'm going to use that word. And for me, in a candidate-led market, the candidates are much more involved in the recruiting process. At the moment, what happens is we decide on a recruiting process that might have 3 steps, 4 steps, some have 6 steps or 8 steps, then depending on the seniority, we might have more or less, but it's defined by the client. This is who we think needs to look at the candidates to make an assessment if they fit. What we're missing in all of this is, what does the candidate need to actually assess if this is the right company for them? Because there is this underlying assumption, I'm just going to say this out loud, that we know best for the candidate. That's why we make the process, and that's why we decide, for example, for instance, who they should be talking to. But it doesn't take it into account. Then you always have, just to put a bit of emphasis on this topic, is you go through 4 interviews, and if you're lucky, you get 20 minutes to ask your questions. After I spent 3 hours, 4 hours talking to the client, doing an assignment, which, if I may open a parenthesis, often is free work, which is a different topic we could talk at length, because I'm going to put all my heart and my knowledge in, and you're going to have it from 5 people. And I've seen this so often being implemented without remunerating a candidate, which I think it's just a no-go. But at least that's in my world of fairness, that shouldn't be happening. But I've been doing that as well because I was in an organization that would allow for a different way. So they're not involved. They get 20 minutes. Out of those 20 minutes, often then the clients speak 15 minutes because they love talking about the questions. But we're not really asking the candidates, what do you need out of this process? Who do you need to talk to? And if I would go at an extreme in my future world, I would say that the candidates will lead their own recruiting process, 100%. And obviously, this is an extreme view, and I think there's shadows of gray in between. But that, for me, is a candidate-led market if the whole power is being given to the candidate and not to the client.
I think when we spoke about this idea, I was a little bit, I'll be honest, I was a little bit taken back thinking, how is that even going to work? Bias seeps in, time for, for example, I was sitting there from the candidate's perspective going, actually, I want to get a job as quick as possible. So I'm going to do one stage with this person, job done. And it doesn't really evaluate properly. So I said, there's a lot of gray areas. So we're talking a hypothetical scenario right now, because you haven't had the chance to implement it yet. If someone who's listening has, then absolutely please reach out to us, because I'll be more than happy to kind of understand that. But we're now going to enter the world of the what ifs, shall we say, with the idea of, hopefully, yourself, myself, and the listeners are going to be sitting there going, actually, we could try that on something and just see how it goes. And like I said at the beginning, this could be the shift that goes. So you use the phrase co-creation in the process, because we were kind of bouncing ideas off around this and what it could actually look like. So from your perspective, say someone gave you the opportunity to do this, right? What could it actually look like from kind of a actual standpoint going for a process?
I love pilots, so let's not just go for a full implementation of this. To be honest, and as you just mentioned, I haven't had the chance to go into detail in a project, but obviously, if I were to work with a client, I would first of all understand what is your philosophy, and understand to also to have this mind shift. I mean, there's people just want ready-made solutions. This one is something that is a hypothesis and a theory in my head, but shifting the idea to what if we gave power to the candidates? What does that mean in terms of our culture? If you are in a very hierarchical company, that might be very difficult to implement. If you're more on a self-organization, I think this could be happening. And I think self-organization is a good word because they do parts of that already. They give the power down and they do all of it. I'm not saying that we should actually omit any recruiters in this process. In contrary, I think it should change. Their role should change. They shouldn't be, I call them minions, filling in, ATS systems and Excel sheets, whatever. I think they should become recruiting partners. A lot of people are called out there like that, but for me, a partner would mean to actually sit down and understand, more like a coach with the candidate, and say, we know what we want. We need to understand what you want. Co-creation for me means, if you go to an extreme and you have a senior person, I think, seniority is a topic also we talked about, is my fantasies with a senior person, that comes in as an HR business partner. Just to give you an example, I would expect an HR business partner to be able to create their own recruiting process and say, tell me who you need to talk to, tell me how you want to show your work. That can be an assessment, that can be a presentation, and just come back with a plan to us and we'll make it happen for you. Obviously, co-creation means we could also say, hey, two interviews need be, because obviously, we want you to meet your manager. which I would expect from an HR business partner to want that interview too. I think there's going to be a lot of match actually. I think people with this idea, when I present it, they think, oh my God, they're just going to ask, talk to one person and then we need to hire them. We haven't solved the question of who makes the final decision, right? This is just about the process for now. But you could still have something in between. It's a spectrum, right? Going from you design it yourself and you are the only decision maker. This is super crass. I know that most companies would probably not want to go there, but that's the extreme of my idea. And then there's anything in between, right? And I think I also spoke about seniority. I think this is maybe more feasible for senior people, but I don't see the reason why we cannot sit down with a junior, also in terms of a learning aspect, and say, hey, these are two things you need to, we have co-creation. Let me guide you through with a few questions on how you could find the right people to talk to. If they don't make the process, they'll learn something for the next process with the next company. They'll learn competence. You see, this is where my learning and organizational development background also comes in. Make everything a learning experience. Give people feedback in this whole process. And if I think that a recruiter would ask me and say, how do you want to co-create a process? I'm like, okay, this company has thought about my needs as well. That alone, I think, and then I'm going to bring in another keyword, employer branding, from an employer branding standpoint. That's the company I want to. We know money makes things. We know benefit makes a big difference. But I think the more and more, and also if you look at generations, they want different things than just money and benefits. They want early sabbaticals. We know that. But being involved is a major point, and this is a way to
impact
just
is one of the biggest things. Like, want to have an impact in the role, and I think if you're saying co-creation, if you can impact how you're getting hired, that it sets a precedence of what it should be like once you're there. There's a few things that as you speak about this, I'm going to just pick out some of the, and you can kind of quick fire back to me about things that I would look at and go, potential problem, right? So number one, let's say, for example, you interviewed with us, right? You know someone who works here. How are we going to know? How is it going to stop that process of you just going to people you know, or that bias elements start to seep in? People that went to the same university as you, or friends of a friend, or same background, that sort of stuff. How are we going to kind of be able to mitigate that?
First and foremost, trusting people that they will be truthful about it. I think this is something, and let's call it the co-creation session, which might be what we call screening now. I would call it the co-creation session. Address it specifically and directly. You might know people. Obviously, you might want to interview those people. This could be part of it, but this is why we think this is not a good idea, or why we think it's a good idea to interview with other people, because you can still talk to them, and you should talk to them. But maybe let's not use the time we have for an official interview. Just have a coffee with them, go to lunch with them. We're happy to provide lunch for it. But let's choose maybe someone else so you can broaden your view. It's a matter of communication, but also trusting that people will do the right thing. And then you always have people that will, profit from that, but they will do the same thing later than within the company. But I think it's hard as a candidate to actually abuse this trust if it's given and communicated so clearly.
How would you stop someone feeling, I guess, uncomfortable about how many or how few steps to have, and taking on that the seniority aspect? I think a senior person would feel comfortable saying, okay, this is who I need to understand, this is who I need to speak to. But a more junior, even a mid in some cases, would sit there and go, how many is too much, how many is too few, who are the right people? I've never had to do something like this before. I mean, no one, as far as I'm aware, has had to do something like this before. So but that how would you stop him kind of feeling a little bit like just a deer in the headlights?
I don't think there's too many or too few. If we co-create, or we have this extreme view that they actually talk to as many people as they think they need, some people will need more and some people will need less. I think there's again, if we go the extreme way, we would just accept that whoever they want to talk to are the right people, and that whoever they want to talk to, or how many they want to talk to, are enough. Not too many, not too little. We're already making this assumption that something is too much and something is too little. But this is still, we're coming from these classic things. We shouldn't have more than 4 steps. And I know also working with agencies, etc. It's like, don't make too many, we're going to lose candidates. Yeah, but this is
My
the old
classic
thinking,
sell.
right?
It's my
You
classic
know,
phrase.
this, I know, and there's truth in it. I'm not saying there's no truth in it, but that's the thing. If you have a candidate who is super skilled, has everything you want, but they are more on a timid side, they're more on an insecure side. That's a personality trait, right?
Hmm.
They might just need more to make that assessment. And if I want the person, why am I not gonna do this? And we go at great length for the for the unicorns. And if you think about that, we should treat everyone as a unicorn. Maybe that explains what I'm trying to say is we're treating unicorns when we want to treat them like that. So we're going to throw in 5K more, we're going to throw in a little benefit, we're going to throw in that. I think we should approach everyone with the same attitude. And if they're not unicorn, then I dare say you haven't done a good screening, which brings me back again to the screening question: who actually screens the candidates? And
Mm.
how do we get those unicorns out? And I think it needs skill, experience, and probably even organizational and coaching knowledge to actually do the screening. And I know a lot of people will probably not be happy about me saying that, but this is not being demeaning, but what the market needs, what the candidate needs, and I think what company needs, and just purely from that perspective.
I see one potential big flaw with it, and it is the cost that comes with it. And in the cost, I mean in the sense of training your internal team properly on how to interview properly, on how to analyze and note take and feedback and things like that. I mean, organizations go to great lengths of doing training programs and things like that. So for a small organization, I think it can work quite easily. But the larger you go, and say, for example, I went to pluck out some completely random mid-level engineer in a completely different part of the company because I want to see how they are handling progression, or for example, right, hypothetical, then that person also then needs to be trained, but they need to be trained correctly. So how I guess we kind of again combat that aspect?
I mean, there is always this trying to find a good balance. And I can just tell you, and this is more from an experience point of view, most recruiting teams I've worked with are really frustrated with the level of interview literacy, I'm going to call it, of the clients, of the people that need to interview. But again, we're bringing back, if this is a candidate market, we should show ourselves from the best side. Showing ourselves from the best side means to have interesting, clever, and fruitful interviews. And this is just not done with a 3-slide PowerPoint that we throw at people, once a year. And it goes a bit back again to where you said if we implemented that. I think this is a complete different philosophy behind it. This is not hire fast, just get the right person. We have probation time, we can still exchange them. This is really the philosophy of we're going to put all the effort in it needs to find the right person on the first shot that's going to stay on for longer, and can be someone who develops and bring value, even though I don't, it's a difficult word. Let's say impact to the company. We expect a lot from people, and they have to be impact. Go the extra mile, go 120%, stay the extra hour. But then again, that does not apply to us as recruiters. I don't get this point, right? So we need to put the 120 and the extra mile. I'm not saying we need to work over hours, but I think you get the point. It's putting the effort in, and we do it, but often it's very much on the surface because the internal clients don't want it. You have restrictions. Our budgets are always very short. I worked in L&D for a long time. It's the first budget that always gets cut together with marketing. It's like, we don't need this, but everybody wants skilled people. So there's a lot of contradiction in that. And how we're going to implement, I think we need to work on what is our philosophy. How much are we willing to invest? How much is the cost of not investing? It's really something that I've rarely seen. And I used it also as an HR business partner, going back to a manager and saying, when they impose their opinion, where the recruiters say, listen, it's your decision, but there's so many red flags. I want the person. I often like to go in with numbers and say, if you do this and the person stays for that long and then leaves, this is going to cost us that much. And people look at you and they're like, are you kidding? And I said, no. So the cost of losing, because we talk about cost of hiring, I think with every role, we should also define what is the cost of losing this person within 12 months. I think it would make, even that little thing would make recruiting probably so much more profitable because they don't care. It's not their budget. So they will not be aware of.
I like the idea of this because, like I said, it's completely different to what we've all been taught on how to do it. I'm curious to find someone to do this. So I will make it my mission. Either someone who's listening, please reach out. Aleks, if you end up finding a team that's willing to do it, please keep us posted. The only thing I can kind of relate it back to, and we spoke about this, is that, of course, as an external agent, I have to work in the parameters of whatever the client suggests. I can talk about it, I can share ideas, but if you say, like, Eden, this is it, this is it. But I do get some chances. There's some organizations I've worked with for quite a while that will co-create parts of the process with me in the sense of, and I had it literally about 2 weeks ago. They were done. Two-stage interview process. They were finished. And it was like, cool, I want to make him an offer. I'm like, whoa, hold on, because he's not ready yet. So this is what you need to do from his side. So we end up having another 2 stages because the candidate needed some more time. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. And that's because the candidate then found out more information that illuminated things that didn't match from his perspective. So if he'd rushed into it, it would have had the impact you just said in the sense of would have joined, would have left. We would have obviously then had to go back and replace that person. Would have had this whole knock-on effect. So that is probably the most recent example where we've done part of that, but it wasn't set up from the beginning of we're going to go and do this. It was pure and simple that I knew that the process wasn't finished from the candidate side. But that's because I'm an external partner and they're quite happy to talk a little bit more openly to me sometimes than they are with the internal team. So, but like I said, I'm curious to see this work in practice or as close to practice as possible. But Aleks, I do appreciate you spending some time and going through all this with us. If somebody does want to kind of continue the conversation with you, where's the best place that they can find you?
You can find me either on LinkedIn, but I think that's probably the easiest. I don't know if you have a means to share that. There's also my homepage, which needs a bit of rework. I'm going to put a disclaimer down here. But just reach out. I think talking in person for me is always the easiest. If you like the idea, or if you just think that you want to have a fierce discussion about it because you think whatever I said wasn't right, happy to hear it. I think it's really going into ideas, and that's why I like to go extreme sometimes in ideas. It doesn't mean it needs to happen, but it helps me to be creative. And I come from a user-centric environment. I always ask myself, what does the user need? And at the moment, if we look at the candidate as a user, I don't think that their needs are met. And I think, as I said, there's little things you can do, there's big things you can do. If somebody wants to do the whole shebang, I'm up for it. But disclaimer as well, I've never done it, so I think we need to co-create on this. But I think there are possibilities to go new ways, and I think it's going to make a difference at some point, maybe not now, but in a year or two, when maybe we are in a true candidate-led market. And when resources get tight, I think there can be a lot of advantage of rethinking things now and not in a few years' time.
Well, I'll put the homepage into the footnotes alongside your LinkedIn so people can find you in whatever capacity. I think I shared this to you when we kind of did the preparation for this in general, and it's individuals like yourself, it's the HR, it's the TA leaders that are currently in one of the hardest markets that we've ever been to find jobs, that are coming up with some of the ideas that are going to be pushing us through, for 10, 15, 20 plus years after this. And I know it's shit right now for a lot of people, but I do stand by that we're going to see the biggest innovation for the industry, not because of AI, not because of some other fancy technologies, but because we're frustrated and there's people who can make actual decisions being treated poorly in recruitment processes. And then when they find jobs, they're not going to stand for it anymore. And it's going to become the overhaul that we need. So yeah, like I said, once again, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts, sharing your ideas with us. And because I know this was a topic that was very close to you and, kind of putting it out there as well. So, but I appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a big pleasure. And if you ever need some more crazy ideas, just reach out. I'm sure I can come up with more than that. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.